Hello and welcome to another edition of the Leader Campus Talk. This time I'm speaking with Tifane Falvey, and she has the performance, is a performance engineer at NASA, or at least one time was, and that's what you have on your website for LinkedIn. And so she is right now without a camera as such, and is calling in, so we'll just continue with the audio portion of this interview. And we'll start out with a question here. And thank you, first of all, for allowing me to interview you and get your viewpoints here on actual aspects of leadership.
You're welcome, Mel, and thanks for having me.
Okay. Tifane, one of the first questions I wanted to read to talk with you about is this aspect of legacy. You have that on your website as well. So what legacy do you believe a leader should strive for?
Well, I think when we're talking about legacy and we're talking about leadership, they are definitely two different aspects of a man's life, because a man can certainly make leadership his legacy, or he can choose to dive in and explore what a legacy would look like for him. And that legacy is unique and separate onto every man that you meet on the planet. And often what I do is I will ask a man, if he had 1 year to live, if he is living his passions right now, currently, in what he's doing, in his profession, in his style of leadership, and what would that man want to do differently for that next year if they only had 1 year to leave that legacy, which again is different than leadership. So you can combine them if our audience is leaders, aspiring leaders. What does leadership look like for each individual in regards to the legacy that they're leaving? Because it's not created equal. Legacy isn't created equal. Leadership is not created equal. And men are often not created equal as well. So it's important to identify legacy and to identify what leadership looks like to the individual that you're working with or speaking with.
Now, I had an interview earlier in this groupings, and one of the aspects is the difference between women and men. Do you see the same kind of difference in men to women in leadership skills or in this aspect of legacy?
I've noticed that women in leadership tend to carry a lot more masculine energy, which is an interesting topic in itself. But women's legacy is also very tightly correlated to how they can help and perpetuate the legacies of others. And I've seen this time and time again when you ask women what their big why it is that they're in leadership. It's often to help those that are working with them and perhaps under them and around them. Whereas for men, it's more of a long-lasting footprint that others can perhaps walk in and emulate. And, you see this with war, you see it with politics. We love to emulate things that have worked well. And men definitely look to the leaders of the past to see how they've led and what's worked and what hasn't worked. But in regards to women, their whys are different. The reason why they're in leadership roles, the reason why they want to create wealth, and all of their whys are very specific, and it's different than a man. So they're on different tracks for different reasons, but accomplishing very similar things in regards to being a leader and setting that example of what leadership should look like. It's only the why that's different.
So how does that have bearing on, you say on your website again, let go of everything that's contrary to your legacy? What do you mean by that, and how can you provide some examples from men and women?
Well, for example, if the legacy that you dream about leaving is similar to, let's say, the legacy that Steve Jobs left behind, we all know what he created in his lifetime. Something that was contrary to his legacy was spending a lot of time and energy in the father role. So if he had dropped a lot of the energy that he had put into leaving this Apple legacy, he may have left quite a different legacy. And I think we could agree on that. When you would, talk to his family and talk to his people that were close to him, they would have said, well, this is the legacy that he left. And it may look wildly different than what he's left. But he had to let go of a belief system that said he had to be Father of the Year.
Okay.
He did not win an Academy Award every year for being Father of the Year, did he? He didn't even win an Academy Award every year for being, Tech Guy of the Year. But as a whole, when you mathematically add up everything he did for the industry, you know where he put his eggs. You can see that in his legacy.
Mm-hmm. I see.
So what I meant by that is it's important to let go of anything that's contrary to what your passions are. And we have a lot of societal norms that tell us what it should be. Mothers should stay at home and work, right? Or maybe now it's appropriate to say fathers should stay home and watch the children and clean the toilets. It really doesn't matter, but the legacy you leave is tied to that. What are your belief systems? What do you want to be doing?
Now, to some extent, this sounds a little like, do you know about force field analysis?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So does force field analysis have any bearing on, or how would it have bearing on this kind of decision of contrary to, or getting rid of those things that are contrary to your legacy? The force of the good versus bad, how can that fit in, or did that influence your decision on this?
I think that the force field analysis is best when working with groups to make informed decisions. I use something different when I'm working with clients and we're doing individual decisions, because I find that I want to get out of that cerebral playground. Okay. And that's where you are. You're in that cerebral sandbox when you're doing informed decision making through the force field analysis. And I prefer to tap into more of a personal GPS system, which often is completely separate from what your mind tells you is right. Your mind can come up with so many things on the left side of the column to tell you why you should do something. But if you really tap into the soul is a little more calibrated for universal truths in regard to the individual spirit.
So how has being a performance engineer at NASA influenced your take on this legacy idea?
That's such a great question. And the way that I would describe the answer is that we have, and I'm going to give you a metaphor, but also a correlating idea. We have a lot of people that subscribe to Western medicine. And then we have an equal amount of people that subscribe to the Eastern medicine. And I'm not sure there's one that's right or one that's wrong. They just work differently, right? And it's important to have both. And I think anyone that's been solidly in the Eastern medicine camp will recognize and appreciate where Western medicine has really benefited people in their lives that they love and care about, and vice versa. But here we have a group of NASA engineers or individuals that are very cerebral, and they're very smart, and they're very analytical, and that's how they use their superpower or their skill. And on the converse side of that, there may be areas where they're weak in dropping down into the physical body, which is what is more Eastern medicine side of it, where you really tap into your soul and your internal GPS system, and you're able to more holistically, if you can combine or marry the intellect with the soul, it goes back to the mind, body, spirit connection. And if you have one part that's unplugged, it may make you a lot better at another area. So if you have an engineer that's somewhat unplugged to some of the soul physical attributes, he could be an absolute superstar as far as figuring out those very deep cerebral intellectual questions that are being consistently brought across his desk daily.
Okay.
So are you following me on that?
Yeah, I'm following you. Go, continue on.
Well, I just think it's important for someone that is for any individual to work all of the legs.
Okay.
So mind, body, spirit, to just bring them all into alignment. And that's part of my role on the planet.
So does this also lead into authentic leadership, or is there some influence of that on your idea of legacy as well?
Well, I don't believe in doing anything that's not authentic. So, of course, leadership definitely needs to have the authenticity of the leader. Because if you hire someone and throw them into a leadership role and they're not equipped with the natural, innate skill set in order to be a leader, you can train all day long. And it's not going to work out the way that you planned. And the same is true for if I'm an Olympic coach and I get someone that really, really has a desire to be on an Olympic team, but they truly, truly don't have the natural, innate, born DNA skill set to be on that Olympic team, it does not matter what type of rigorous training program you put that person through. At the end of the day, they're still going to feel uncomfortable in that position. And when we're uncomfortable, what happens to our performance?
Yeah, I see. So you're pretty much a holistic approach. I noticed that one person that you follow quite a bit is Richard Branson. He seems to have the same type of character, I guess, of being open, free, and building this legacy. What influence does he have on your idea?
Well, separately from what we've discussed, one of the things that I enjoy about Richard Branson is that something I've studied and subscribed to is the idea of tithing. And I'm not speaking from a religious context, but when you go out and create something, whether that's a meal at your home or whether that's $1 million, I believe that it's important to give back to something that causes you to feel, goosebumps. So an organization or a child or a family or someone you see that's homeless, it doesn't really matter because, again, each person is so unique that what touches them, what drives them to go and be inspired to help another is different. But Richard Branson has figured out the art of tithing, and because he tithes so big, he's able to create so big. And it goes all the way back to the beginning. Richard Branson wouldn't need to have $1 in his bank account in order to understand the tithing. So there's an equal and opposite reaction to everything that we do. And from a universal perspective, we want to pay people more that are giving more. There's a direct correlation. And so that's one of the things that fascinates me about him is he really understands the give and take, not from a poverty perspective or any perspective of lack, but from a perspective of I have it to give and I will give it. And that could be of his mind, and that could also be of his spirit and his soul, but it can also be of his finances. All of that part is irrelevant. But what is relevant is that he equally, from a percentage-wise, always gives on every dollar that he earns. And to me, that's incredibly impressive and something that I enjoy emulating.
You sound like also someone who has done some studies with mythology and looking at the holistic aspects of people, or and how mythological stories build into that as well. Has mythology been a type of influence too?
It hasn't with me. I haven't studied a lot of mythology. I'm interested in the soul. I'm interested in the hidden laws, just like gravity. Gravity is in effect at all times. You can understand gravity. You can study gravity. You cannot understand gravity, and you could have never heard of gravity at, say, 2 years old, but it's still operating around you every minute of every second of every day. And I feel like the hidden laws that are operating around us, that are creating happiness and wealth and health and success, and every single experience that you could possibly shop for is currently on its way to you based on what it is that you're being right now in this very second. And so if you're out of alignment and what you see showing up in your backyard is grief, pain, suffering, poverty, disease, then you are driving that. If you're falling and you're having a skinned up knee or skinned up elbow and you hit your head, you're not in alignment with the laws of gravity. That is truth. You're not in alignment with the laws of gravity, right? If you're in a plane and it happens to stay afloat, then that plane is in alignment with all of the laws of gravity. The second something goes awry with that, what happens? Plane goes down. Well, it's no different with the spiritual alignment. So I really enjoy going in and looking at where a business is not in alignment, because they'll feel the pain. It's so easy. It's like, where's the scrape? Where's the bump? Where's the bruise? Because once I see it and I understand the story behind it, or the way that there's a predictability behind it, then I can pinpoint which spiritual hidden law is not being respected or abided by. And that's how we make shifts and changes in people's businesses, in their lives, in their health, in their finances.
So this lineup, this aspect of lining up for a leader, then his approach or her approach is that aspect of alignment, not only aligning him or herself, but also trying to align the company in that kind of situation, if I'm catching you correctly.
Right. So there's a whole other aspect to it, which is the company, or all of the individuals that make up the company, or even the people leading the company. There's an energetic alliance that happens. And if you are hiring people that aren't in alignment with that, you'll run into some very big issues within the company and within the culture within the company.
So it sounds as if some aspects of neuroscience is involved here as well, and how the brain functions, and how do you take advantage of that, or how does that feed into this idea? Well,
there's neurological impulses that are happening all the time, and everything to me is energy, and it's energy really that I prefer to focus on, because that's something I can feel. So when we go into neuroscience, or we could talk about quantum physics, it's things that are almost invisible. So they're hard to discuss, they're hard to quantify, they're hard to explain. But when I describe things in regards to an equal and opposite reaction to absolutely every word that comes out of your mouth, every thought that is thought, then people start to understand their contribution to it. If I get too cerebral, then you're missing out on the translation. So you can talk neuroscience all day and force field analysis, and you can talk about all of that. But really what we want to do is we want to translate these universal laws and these concepts into user-friendly language, so that your average employee, your average man or woman that you meet on the street can utilize them now today, so they can take it home and change their lives.
Well, I think that's a very fascinating way of looking at things, Tifane, and I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. And maybe later on down the line we can get in touch again and see how your opinion also of current events or leadership events that take place fill in on this idea of performance and the aspect of a legacy. I've never really thought about it in that kind of fashion, so it's very interesting to me. I thank you for the talk.
You're welcome. I appreciate you having me on your call.
Well, thanks so much. I appreciate it. And Tifane, the performance engineer at NASA, and I'd like to say thank you so much. I'm honored to have spoken with you, and I appreciate your time.
Thanks. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.